Happy Sunday morning. Everybody, I think we should all settle down now and start. ये जी ऊपर से एक बहुत ज़ालिम लाइट है, आप ठीक है, बस ऐसे ही नहीं, थोड़ी सी होनी चाहिए ताकि हम तो नजर आए। कहीं और से लाइट नहीं आ सकती, यहाँ से ऊपर से।
बस ठीक है भाई, ये बंद कर दे, हमारे ऊपर लाइटें बंद कर।
Welcome everybody to this. आपको ये देखना Welcome to this session on the life and work of Saadat Hasan Manto. I am privileged and very happy today to be interviewing Professor Ayesha Jalal, who is, for me and for many people, perhaps the most important historian of Pakistan and indeed of South Asia. Professor Jalal is a path-breaking historian and has written not one but many very, very important, literally eye-opening books, especially for my generation of Pakistanis. These include The Sole Spokesman, which really for the first time told the truth about the partition and how it happened and at that political level. Also a wonderful book called Self and Sovereignty, another fantastic book called Democracy and Authoritarianism in South Asia, The State of Martial Rule, etc. Professor Jalal has taught at Columbia University, Harvard University, and now teaches at Tufts. And her latest book is about Saadat Hasan Manto. It is called The Pity of Partition. The cover is right there, you can see it. A fun fact about both Manto and Professor Jalal is that she is Saadat Hasan Manto's grandniece. Yes. And when you read this book, as I have been doing for the last few days, you really get a sense not only of a historian's engagement with her subject, but also deeply sympathetic and affectionate inhabiting of the man's mode, which is very precious for us. So today we will talk to Professor Jalal about Saadat Hasan Manto and about her book on Saadat Hasan Manto. Professor Jalal, I want to ask you, this book, The Pity of Partition, which will be out in a few weeks, what made you think of this book?
Well, I think I've always wanted to write a book about Saadat Hasan Manto. I think it was a question of the right time, and the opportunity presented itself when I was invited to give the Lawrence Stone lectures at the university, Princeton University. Lawrence Stone is a famous historian that many of you may not know of, who advocated the return of the narrative at a time when history was beginning to take on more of a quantitative strain. So the return of the narrative, when I was invited to give the talk, somebody suggested that I do a micro-history. And I had recently seen some of Manto's letters that were in the possession of my sister-in-law, his youngest daughter. And so I thought that this was an opportunity for me to connect the micro-history of Manto, his life, Manto the individual, his family, and the community, the nation, at a time of a dramatic historical rupture. So this is really a work of Manto, his writings, and his times at a moment of historical disjuncture. I happen to be, I think, a historian of partition. So this was my return to the subject of partition, but through a more personal angle, using Manto's work. So I gave 3 lectures, and the book is structured on the basis of those lectures, stories, memories, and histories.
That's very interesting. You say the return of the narrative, and that's what I was thinking today. In fact, I wanted to talk to you about this backstage, but I'm getting to do it now here. The first thing that struck me when I was reading it was that it read like a sort of like a narrative. When I read a sort of academic book, I put on an academic student I have to put on these glasses and look for footnotes and look for words that are difficult and that are specialized. But this is a very accessible book, which is written in the narrative style. Let's talk about stories, about the first part of the book. Tell us a little bit about how you structured it. What was it that struck you the most about Manto's partition stories?
Well, I mean, I never met Manto, I must confess, but I did grow up in a household where he had a larger-than-life presence. And so, you know, one of the first stories that fascinated me was Toba Tek Singh when I was a child, and before I could really read Urdu, I knew how to say Apati ko gurdi aise to bitahana ta mungdidar of the lantan. I think that that's the first thing I learned in life, perhaps. And I knew then there was a relationship with this man that really transcended the family bond. And I got my opportunity to study partition when I was a doctoral student at Cambridge. But the questions I asked were very different from, obviously, the questions that Manto asked, because he was interested in capturing the consequences of partition. As a student of history, I was interested in understanding the causes of partition. So although we asked different questions, I was keenly interested in seeing the extent to which Manto's stories were corroborated by the historical evidence. And you know, Manto used to say that he never wrote about things unless he experienced them or had heard about them. In other words, I mean, his characters were not fictional, they were real-life people. He wrote about things that were true. So I think what I did with stories was to show the extent to which the historical narrative can be embellished with literature, especially of a particular kind that Manto produces as witness to history. His shahadat, of partition. So I was able to bring, show the merge of how fictional narrative can merge imperceptibly with historical narrative. And that's my attempt in the first lecture, to show how Manto was not only able to do that, but also to provide insights, for instance, into what we frequently talk about as Hindu-Muslim violence,
yes,
communitarian violence. And what he does is to show that it is completely erroneous to just lump this violence as either Hindu or Muslim. There's a very individual dimension to
yes,
it. And Muslim can kill Muslim just as Hindu can kill Hindu, and it is not a religious motive. So he makes you think, and he shakes up that certitude with which partition violence has tended to get packaged. So I think he really adds something new to the historian. If you just look at historical archives or official archives, or even read newspapers, you are not able to break out of that as well as you can with Manto. So I think he really helps strengthen the historical narrative, as I call it. He embellishes the historian's craft with his very perceptive accounts of partition.
That's wonderful what you say, because I remember in this hall about 6 months ago, 6 or 7 months ago, I was here to watch a Joka Theatre's play about Manto. And they were staging, one of the things they read out and enacted was Dekh Kabira Roya, Manto's short piece about the moment right after the partition. It shows a man who could be Bhagat Kabir roaming around the streets of a newly independent state, an unnamed newly independent state, and there are, rampaging vigilantes all around him, and people are taking off the murtis of Lakshmi from the tops of mansions, and people are saying that all prostitutes have to find husbands within 30 days, and religious leaders are delivering sermons, and a general is delivering a sermon in another place saying, we will go hungry for 100 days, but we will not surrender to the enemy. And in the audience there were gasps around me, and I was also thinking, my God, this man wrote this piece 60 years ago, but it reads like it's about today. And in that moment I felt like Manto was on some kind of mirage, where he had transcended the particularities of time and place, that what he was writing about was simultaneously historical, because it was embedded in a certain moment and it grew out of a certain moment, and yet it spoke to us so eloquently about what we were living through today. It's more powerfully sometimes than contemporary writing can do. And so in a sense, that was my experience of it. And when I'm listening to you here, you're saying that he more than just confirms the historian's instinct or the historian's hunch, he sort of adds to the historian's task. So if you read Manto's short stories, you get the partition, but you get more than the partition, you get human nature. The second part of your book deals. It's titled Memories, and one of the centers of it